Sorry, hang on a second. I gotta get rid of all these campaign texts that I keep getting.
2 hours later.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, if you live in the US, you probably know that we have some midterms coming up in just a few weeks, and these are Anyway, according to about 50 of the texts that I just deleted here, this is the most substantial midterm election in our lifetimes. This isn't untrue. This is an important election, there's a lot on the line, but doesn't it feel like every election lately has been the most important election ever? Why do we just seem to bounce from one crisis point to another when it comes to our elections in the United States? I mean, as we all learned in school, this country is the last great bastion of democracy in the world. Also the first bastion of democracy, the beginning and the end of everything, apparently. Also the smartest country in the world, the only free country in the world, the strongest military in the world, the richest country in the world, the shimmering city on the hill. Maybe the reason why we keep having one crisis after another in our elections is that when it comes to voting anyway, we're none of those things. In fact, when compared to a lot of other countries in the world, we kind of suck at it. All right, before I lose all the flag-waving Americans in my audience, let's start by acknowledging something here. The founding of the United States was a pivotal moment in the history of democracy in the world. No, we didn't invent democracy. In fact, we gained our independence from a country that had a parliamentary system, though with an unelected head of state. And there were democracies in ancient Greece, that's where the term comes from, and also many indigenous tribes had forms of democracy. But the United States, according to many historians, is the oldest continuous democracy in the world. And you know what? We should be proud of that. The problem is, well, we're the oldest democracy in the world. Like, you know how the original iPhone was this like total game changer and launched us into the era of smartphones, and now there's all these other companies that are doing the same thing, making their own smartphones, arguably better in some ways? Yeah, the original iPhone was amazing. It literally changed the world. But would you want to use the original iPhone now? Yeah, the election system in the United States is the original iPhone of election systems. Although to be fair, it has evolved a little bit over the years, so maybe it's closer to, I don't know, an iPhone 6 at this point. Also, in the interest of accuracy, the United States doesn't have one election system. It's actually a patchwork of election systems because every state kind of has their own take on it, but that's my metaphor and I'm sticking to it. The way the US runs elections made perfect sense 230 years ago when it was first created. But of course, the world has changed a lot since then. A lot of these newer democracies that have come up since then were able to kind of jump in with newer, better systems that just make a lot more sense today. Which is why, as much as we love to call ourselves the freest and most democratic country in the world, many international freedom watchdogs don't have us at the top of the list. In fact, we're nowhere near the top. We can start with Freedom House, which doesn't have rankings per se, just lists countries as free, partly free, and not free. Gotta love the simplicity. Well, they have the US listed as free, which is a good start, and they give us a grade of 83 out of 100. Not great, not terrible. Then you've got the Democracy Index from the Economist Intelligence Unit. They've actually been keeping track of democracy trends since 1946. They rank countries in 4 categories: full democracy, flawed democracy, hybrid regime, and authoritarian. They rank the US at 26th in the world. In fact, we don't even make the top category. We come in as a flawed democracy. One more I'll point out is the Democracy Matrix from the German Research Foundation. They rank countries as working democracies, deficient democracies, hybrid regime, moderate autocracy, and hard autocracy. And yeah, again, we don't crack the top category in this one. We come in as a deficient democracy and rank 36th in the world. The countries that performed the best in these studies were, in the Democracy Matrix, Denmark, Norway, Finland, Sweden, Germany, Switzerland, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Belgium, and Costa Rica. And on the Democracy Index chart, it's Norway, Finland, New Zealand, Sweden, Iceland, Denmark, Ireland, Taiwan, Australia, and Switzerland. So the countries that show up in the top 10s of both of these lists include Norway, Finland, Denmark, Sweden, Switzerland, and New Zealand. And in case you're wondering, there wasn't as much agreement on the bottom 10 in each of these studies, but 2 that did make the worst of the worst were North Korea and Syria. So I mean, you know, at least we're not them. If you want to go into the details of how they put all this together, what their criteria was and all that, I'll put the links to it down in the description. You can go take a look for yourselves. But the point is, we've got room to improve. And a lot. There is a very long list of problems with our voting systems in the United States, from the outsized influence of money in politics to rampant gerrymandering to the electoral college system, all of which leads people to feel like their votes don't matter, so they become apathetic and they stay home. leading the US to have one of the lowest voter participation rates in the Western world. By the way, I mentioned gerrymandering a second ago. I'm not going to really go into it because that's not what this video is about, but I will say that I think gerrymandering should be illegal. It's literally the politicians picking their voters instead of the other way around. Politicians who do it should be thrown away into jail for the rest of their lives. It is anti-American, it's anti-democratic, and I'm going to die on this hill. But the argument has been made, and I find it pretty compelling myself, that at the heart of all these issues is the voting system itself, the way we count the votes. That's right, kids. We're going to talk about first-past-the-post voting. First past the post is basically winner take all. In other words, you get one vote for one candidate, and whoever candidate gets the most votes wins. Which, I mean, it sounds like it makes sense. I mean, that's democracy, right? And yeah, it does make sense in a strictly two-party system. Because if you only have two people running, then whoever wins will by definition get more than 50% of the vote. But add one person to it, whether it's a third party or if you're voting for multiple people in like a primary, say, things start to not work so well. Because if that third person gets any significant number of votes, you end up with somebody winning the election without getting 50% of the vote. In other words, they win a plurality but not a majority. So you could wind up with a representative that 60% of people voted against. And the more candidates in the race, the smaller the percentage the winner would actually get, and the less democratic the whole thing becomes. This sounds like a little thing, but it's not. Some pretty bad results happen over time. For example, there's a spoiler effect. Let's say you start a third party because you just don't feel like either of the traditional parties really represent you. Perfectly valid, makes sense. Well, in a first-past-the-post system, you are basically ensuring that you're going to siphon votes away from the party that you most align with, and basically hand the election over to the guy from the party that you least align with. Perfect example, the year 2000, Ralph Nader ran as a strong Green Party candidate on a progressive platform, and he wound up pulling just enough votes away from Al Gore to swing the election to George W. Bush, who, by the way, did not win the popular vote or get more than 50% and was kind of given to it in the Supreme Court, but let's just not go into that. But hey, look, if you're on the right side of the aisle, you don't like me pointing out that fact, well, let's direct your attention to the election in 1992, when Ross Perot ran as a conservative independent and basically handed the election to Bill Clinton. Perot got almost 20 million votes, which is super impressive for a third party in the United States, but he didn't win a single state, he got 0 electoral college votes, and Clinton won with only 43% of the popular vote. I actually walked past Ross Perot at the mall here in Dallas one time. It's not much of a story, but it happened. But the point is, he was able to get 20 million votes because there's a lot of Republicans that may be fiscally conservative, but they don't really care about all the social wedge issues that the Republican Party gets involved in. Or, you know, from the other side, maybe you're a big environmentalist and you want to start voting Green Party because you think the Democrats are too corrupt, but you know if you vote for the Green Party, you're just going to help out the Republican who wants to do away with the EPA. Voters in this system are constantly having to vote strategically and play 4D chess and support the least bad candidate instead of actually voting for the cause or the person that they believe in. It's like every time you step into the ballot box, you've got to hold your nose and vote for somebody that you don't particularly like just because you don't want to let the other guy win. You know, or as South Park pointed out, it's always a choice between a turd sandwich and a giant douche. So yeah, people don't really get excited about voting. Now, to go even further in our winner-take-all system, whoever has control of the House or the Senate, even if it's just by one seat, they get to control all the committees. So there's no incentive to work together. Candidates have no incentive to move to the middle because they'll always get primaried from the political extremes, all of which just moves the parties further and further apart, leading to the polarization we see today. There's a lot of other reasons why we're polarized today, but the way we count the votes is definitely part of that reason. This is not a left or right issue, it's a systems issue. So let's take a look at some different, arguably better, ways of doing this. So there's essentially 3 types of voting systems: plurality majority, proportional representation, and mixed systems. And every country has their own variations of these different systems. There's no way to cover all of them, but here's a few kind of high-level examples. Okay, so under the plurality majority category, you have first past the post, which we just talked about. Then there's the 2-round system, block voting, and party block voting. So I was talking a second ago about how the first past the post system, you can get people who win the election without winning a majority. Well, the 2-round system is a way to prevent somebody from winning the election without getting a majority. It's basically a runoff system. So, you know, you have your first round of elections, and if nobody gets more than 50% of the vote, you take the top 2 people, do a second vote, and whoever gets that wins. And that way you actually get somebody who wins more than 50% of the vote. Block voting has voters use as many votes as there are seats to fill their district, and they're often free to vote for candidates regardless of their party affiliation. I should point out this is especially more useful in systems where there are multiple representatives per district. There are some places that have more than one representative per district, so you can have representatives from different parties. And one advantage of this system is that it helps retain a voter's ability to vote for individual candidates while increasing the role of parties at the same time. Party block voting is kind of like block voting, but you vote for a party and not for an individual candidate. The actual people who represent your district would be voted on by the party itself. This is a simple to use system, but it suffers from some of the same disadvantages found in first past the post. Okay, so those are all examples of majority plurality systems. The next system of voting is called proportional representation, often just shortened to PR. This basically takes the percentage of the total votes that a political party receives and then assigns that percentage of seats to that party in the legislature. So let's say you have a legislature with 100 seats for easy math, and the orange party gets 40% of the vote, the green party gets 30%, the red party gets 20%, and the blue party gets 10%. Those parties would be given 40, 30, 20, and 10 seats respectively. This way, the overall proportion of interest in the people is reflected in the representation. Now, the advantage of the PR system is that it more accurately reflects how a population has voted. Plus, there's few wasted votes. It also encourages the development of multiple parties, and it incentivizes these parties to work together to form coalitions, instead of, say, calling your opponent a blood-sucking, child-molesting Satan worshiper. The overall effect is that these parties tend to move more to the center rather than the extremes. Now, one disadvantage to the PR system is that it kind of weakens constituencies. In other words, like local districts and county representation, localities basically. They're less prioritized than the overall mix of public sentiment. And then you've got mixed systems, which are exactly what they sound like. They're a combination of first past the post and proportional representation. So a voter would have two ballots basically when they go vote. There's one that they vote for a party for the proportional house, and then there's a candidate for representation that's an individual vote. This way the overall will of the people is reflected, but also local constituencies are also represented. But no talk of different voting systems is complete without talking about ranked choice voting, also known as single transferable vote, an alternative vote, an instant runoff voting. Multiple names are fun. I'll stick with ranked choice voting for the purposes of this video because with ranked choice voting, you, wait for it, rank your choices. So instead of casting just one vote for one candidate, you actually rank the candidates based on your preference. For example, if you're a libertarian and feel like Republicans have gotten a little too brown shirty for your taste, you can actually vote Libertarian as your first choice, and then Republican as your second choice, and then just go down the line. Then if your top choice doesn't get a majority, your vote would just go down to your second choice, and if that one doesn't get a majority, it'll go down to your third choice, and so on. In this system, you can actually vote what you believe in, and you know you're not going to throw your vote away, or that you're actually going to lean the table toward the party you least agree with. In this system, third-party candidates actually have a chance, voters can actually vote their conscience, and parties are incentivized to move to the center because if they get too extreme, their base can always vote for some other party. Or form their own. So again, there's a million different ways of doing all these different systems, but let's take a look at the 6 countries that keep popping up in the top 10 democracy ratings. What do they do? What is it that they do that works so well? Well, in Norway, they've got proportional representation. In Finland, they have proportional representation for parliament, and then first past the post for president in 2 rounds format. Denmark has a party list proportional representation system. Sweden has an open list style party list proportional representation system. Switzerland has a mix of proportional representation for the assembly and then direct voting for referendums. And New Zealand has a mixed member proportional representation system. New Zealand's actually pretty interesting. They were the first country to give women the vote, meaning they were the first country with universal suffrage, and they have a special election for Maori representatives, for the natives from New Zealand. So they actually are guaranteed representation in their legislature. Anyway, as I said before, there's a million different ways of doing these things. Every country has their own twist on it, but most international election watchdogs agree that some form of proportional representation is the most fair and most democratic system going. People in these countries feel more represented, they have more say in their government, and the quality of living and happiness levels are higher. Look at that, something that actually trickles down. So all that sounds great, but could it ever happen here in the United States? Really? I'll admit, as much as I love these ideas, it does sound impossible right now. I mean, things just feel too stuck. But look, to be fair to ourselves, we have evolved our voting systems before. When the Constitution was written, originally only white landowning males were allowed to vote. In other words, the elite. The idea that everybody had a right to vote was very not on the table at the time. But those rights have been expanded over time. And in fact, to be fair, one could make the argument that the history of the United States is a history of regular expansion of voting rights, with irregular periods of backsliding. Just to hammer this point home a little more, women's suffrage happened just over 100 years ago. There are literally people alive right now who were born at a time when literally half the country wasn't allowed to vote. And there are efforts moving in the direction of the things that I was talking about in this video. Alaska recently started using ranked choice voting, and they elected their first indigenous person to Congress. Many states are joining what they call the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, where they pledge to vote along with the winner of the popular vote to prevent electoral college upsets. This is somewhat political, and the legality of it is still up in the air, but still. Things are slowly changing, and they can change. But the only way to do that is to vote for politicians who want open access to voting rights and not restricting it. I can't tell you who to vote for, but if a better, more representative and less extreme democracy is important to you, you have to get out and vote in the next couple of weeks, and vote for people who are trying to expand voting rights. Here are some resources to help you. The first is vote411.org. This is run by the League of Women Voters, and it's a pretty great website. Just enter your street address, and they'll tell you when the election is, where your polling place is located. You can even pull up a sample ballot so you can see who's running for what, and in many cases, see what their positions are on various issues. You can also register to vote from here, depending on where you're from, and they show upcoming debates and forums so you can get involved. Then there's vote.org, where you can check your registration and do it online if you need to, find your polling place, get election reminders, and find specific rules and info about your individual state. And remember Rock the Vote? It's still a thing. At rockthevote.org, you can check your registration status, request an absentee ballot, click on your state on a map and find out all the rules for your state, and find a sample ballot plus a lot of other information. I'll put the links to all these in the description. Of course, there's always the option of just Googling this information yourself, but hey, somebody else has already done the work for you. You might as well take them up on it. But that's really the main takeaway from this video. Yes, our election system is frustrating and it's ancient and it makes you want to give up on it altogether. I get it. But that's all the more reason that you should vote. The only way to really move anything in this country is to show up in massive numbers. Right now, we are in a bit of a crisis point. Polarization is about as bad as it's ever been, and faith in our elections is under attack. Now, again, I'm not here to tell you who to vote for, but I do encourage you to make a plan and do it. As the meme says, if your vote didn't count, they wouldn't be trying so hard to keep you from doing it. And I hope this has been interesting enough to get you to kind of look into other election systems around the world and start to advocate for things like proportional representation and ranked choice voting. It's time to upgrade the iPhone. Or get the Samsung whatever if you don't like the iPhone. Look, the metaphor's hanging on by a thread here, but I'm sticking with it. Also, if you're from another country that has a different system, I know I have people from all over the world watching this. I would love to hear your experiences where you're from. Do you enjoy the voting system? Do you think it's good? What are the pitfalls maybe that I'm missing in these things that I'm talking about here? Share in the comments, please. And by the way, if all the number crunching involved in these different voting systems is surprising to you, I know it's kind of a bit over my head sometimes, but you might want to bone up on your math skills with a little course called Mathematical Fundamentals from a little website called Brilliant. Actually, it's not a little website. They've got so much stuff on there. It's not just a website. They've got the app and everything. Through 28 interactive courses covering 225 concepts and exercises, the Mathematical Fundamentals course is, dare I say it, fundamental to understanding the world. Math was always a course I struggled with in school. My brain just, I don't know, it's just not wired for it. But Brilliant uses these interactive graphics and illustrations in a way that just helps it all make more sense. You might say it taught this old dog some new tricks. Woof, baby. Woof. And of course, this is just one of dozens of courses on Brilliant. After getting the fundamentals down, you can step up to algebra and calculus, to astronomy, solar energy, basic physics, all the way out to neural nets, statistical probability. You can go as basic or as advanced as you want, and it's a lot of fun. And it's especially fun if you struggle with a subject in school because this is just a whole different kind of learning. It should actually be called brain hacking because it's so much different from traditional schooling. And if you want to get a taste of that brilliant magic, you can do the first couple of lessons of any of their courses for free if you sign up for brilliant.org/answerswithjoe. And if you like what you see, you can sign up for the premium subscription that gives you access to all their courses and get 20% off your subscription. But it's only for the first 200 people, so if you haven't given it a look yet, you might surprise yourself. Go to brilliant.org/answerswithjoe. Links in the description. All right, big thanks to Brilliant for supporting this video, and a huge shout out to the Answer Files on Patreon and the channel members that are forming an awesome community, helping me out, keeping the lights on around here. I can't thank you guys enough. There's some new people that have joined. Let me murder their names real quick. We got Mr. Aspirin, Tim Holden, Danny M, Raphael Sherrill, Sir Balmount Jr., Barb, Yona SD, JB Sparks, Robin Helm, the Ivies, Thomas Steffies, and David Taylor. Thank you guys so much. If you'd like to join them, get early access to videos, access to exclusive live streams, and get a little thing by your name in the comments, makes you stand out a little bit, just hit the little join button down below. Please do like and share this video if you liked it. And if this is your first time here, maybe check this one out. Google thinks you'll like that one. Or you can look at all the little thumbnails in the sidebar over here if you're on your browser. If they have my face on them, click on them, take a look. And if you enjoy them, I invite you to subscribe because I come back with videos every Monday. All right, well, if you stuck around to the end of this video, I appreciate it. You didn't unsubscribe. I know I lost a lot of people on this video, but whatever. I like to cover different things sometimes, and I think this is an important topic because, you know, elections, they matter. So thanks a lot for watching. Please go out there, have an eye-opening rest of the week. Stay safe, and I'll see you next Monday. Love you guys. Take care.